Nadav, how's it going? Omer, how you guys doing?
Pretty good.
Good. How are you? Yeah.
Doing great, doing great. I see people are coming in quite a lot, so that's great. We'll get started in just a minute. Um, Nadav, you're out in London?
Yes. Still here.
Still
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. I'm based in London, and yeah, nowhere to go really right now.
Yeah. I hear that. Hopefully that will change soon.
Yeah.
All right, I think we're gonna get started. Omer, when you're out in Tel Aviv?
The office is in Tel Aviv. I'm a little bit to the south, but it doesn't really matter. I mean, the office is where the kids are not. So that's basically the situation right now for the last, I don't know, month or so.
Very good. So I think we're going to get started here. We have quite a few people in, and this recording will be available afterwards. So that's great. Let me just pull this up over here. Okay, cool. So let me just do a quick introduction. I'm Yair Solo, CEO, founder of Centraleyes. Thank you all for joining today. With me today, I have two esteemed guests. First of all, we have Omer Pinsker. He's the CEO of OP Innovate. Omer's worked for over 20 years in the domains of IT environments and technologies. He specializes in cyber defense, consulting, and development and implementation of long-term, large-scale cyber projects. He's worked quite a bit with governments as well as private organizations, and he specifically acts as a cyber security strategy consultant for decision makers, board members, and he works a lot on the strategic end of the cybersecurity project lifecycle. Also with us today is Nadav Schatz. He's the director of the advisory and architecture at Orange Cyber Defense. Nadav comes as an experienced cybersecurity specialist with a proven track record as a strategic advisor, architect, chief information security officer, and a business leader. 20 years of experience across a broad spectrum of industries, multidisciplinary knowledge, including software security, cyber risk and compliance, security engineering and consultancy. And he's also recognized as a trusted advisor for the digital technology cybersecurity ecosystem. Both Omer and Nadav are people I know for many years, and on a professional level have a great amount of respect for. So with that, I thought we'd get started today. Today's topic is really focused on vendor risk and the supply chain. But, before we get started, there's going to be a QA box that you can post questions in. We'll be answering those at the end of the session, so please feel free to post any questions that you have for the experts here, and we'd love to get those towards the end. We have here quite a bit of statistics here on what we've seen in the vendor risk space and the supply chain attacks over the last year in particular, where there have been an increase of hundreds of percent in cybersecurity incidents globally. With that, driving many companies to deal with cyber risk in a much more serious way. We saw the SolarWinds attack recently, which is obviously bringing, cyber risk from the vendor's perspective, third parties, supply chain up to the top of mind now for many organizations. But the truth is, it's been a problem for a long time, and we've seen attacks all the way dating back to the Target attack, 6-7 years ago, and many attacks in between, where the supplier or vendor or third party that has access to either assets or data often is the attack vector. Maybe just a little bit about the recent attacks and landscape. Omer, you've been involved with a lot of companies, helping them as they've been attacked recently, globally, in Israel. What trends are you seeing there from the vendors, vendor risk perspective? And specifically, maybe you can focus on like the attacker side, because I know that's a world that you guys are quite entrenched in. Are they getting more sophisticated? What are the changes that you're seeing, in that space?
Yeah, sure. And thanks for the intro. So we've been responding to different campaigns recently. We've been helping against the pay to key, the ransomware campaign, and the SolarWinds, the Sunburst, and so on. We've been assisting different types of organization and different sectors worldwide. Like for instance, we've practiced incident response for a utility company in the States, and we've been involved in a campaign against the entire supply chain on the Israeli market. So you can see different, the modus operandi has been changing. If attacks before this period of time was a bit more complex, and the attacks that are being launched are now much more complex. Like for instance, the SolarWinds campaign. You can see that there is a lot of investment involved here from the attacker's point of view. Different weak points were involved, and the mass of the victims here are quite amazing. I mean, if you're looking at the declaration of the joint venture of the FBI, the NSA, and the CISA, the US CERT, all pointing out to the Russian as the tech actor. That's quite amazing. That's something that we're not used to see, and that's quite an involvement in this world.
Yeah, thank you. That's super helpful. Maybe Nadav, you could talk about it. I mean, Omer just kind of set the stage really for how sophisticated attackers have become and how much they're really exploiting vendors and third parties in quite a staged attacks using different attack vectors, often doing this over a long period of time. Also, what are the solutions that you see in that space that are being deployed and helping organizations kind of utilize in order to deal with this kind of growing threat? I would love to hear kind of your perspective on that from that consultancy side.
Yeah, so maybe I can summarize it and say let's maybe shift the focus to the organization side, because we're talking about the attackers, we're talking about the defenders like Omer. But if we take a step back, and really SolarWinds, they just brought the supply chain attack vector back in the news, I think, because it was always there. You mentioned, Target around 2013, the big and famous milestone attack. So there were always attacks on the supply chain. But I think that, again, if we focus on the organizations for a second, what's happening is that the supply chain environment and the third-party environment, it's expanding. And there are a lot more entities that are now involved and share security responsibilities, and the interdependence, interreliance on more and more suppliers is getting much more significant for each and every organization. And also what's happening from the CISO community side of things, how security managers, security officers experience this. So I think that it has the dynamic change, and it has become a more significant core business security requirement. And it's now being acknowledged by senior management and security officers as something that should be on the top, should be a top priority and on the table, and not just like a subcategory of attacks or issues or risks, but it is a very big security objective. And that's that's where we start, by defining this as a core security goal, core security objective, with the senior management involvement and awareness. So I think that's part of the shift. The environment is expanding.
Yeah, I mean, I know that you guys at Orange have like a CISO as a service kind of offering there that you guys are sometimes even serving as that CISO. So yeah. Is that something that you see really shifting to top priority? Is vendor risk now top of mind?
Yeah, definitely. That's basically what's happening. We're a cybersecurity provider, or in cyber defense, we're consultants. So we work very closely with our customers and with the security organizations. And we get a lot more requirements now around third-party security assurance and third-party risk management. And those requirements are coming from this topic. That's the theme. It's not something else. It is a requirement focused or dedicated to third-party risk management. And so we need to support it, and we need to help our customers, whether it's through consulting, risk management, or third-party security management consulting and technologies. And sometimes, we need to rethink the security architecture and help our customers with security design or control solutions, products, technologies that address this topic. So yeah, there are a lot more requirements now that are focused on the third-party risk problem.
Yeah, I think like the last year, we've seen a huge change in dependency on technology and on SaaS products, and in general, remote working, right? With the COVID-19 and what that's done to the workforce. I mean, you talk about the numbers in the U.S. today. You're talking about almost 85-90% of the workforce working remotely to some extent. I've seen statistics there around, when they surveyed the employees, over 50% say they'll never go back to a full-time job in an office. Whether their employers will agree to that or not, you'll certainly see a shift of a lot more remote workstations. Maybe Omer, by you, maybe we can just look at it like, what is that shift doing to the market? How has that affected the attack landscape? The fact that we're so dependent now on third-party tools and being remote, but it's still being secure, right? There's a lot of things that have like completely shuffled the deck for us, right? As a result.
So that's an evolution being fast forward, because if an organization decides that he wants to work remotely, that's okay, because then he will lay out the infrastructure and everything will be tested. But during this COVID-19 crazy times, things are being changed fast, and it's sometimes too fast, because you can see it both from a response point of view of an attacks that we are responding to. You can see that VPN access or remote desktop connections and so on. It's practically the attack surface are being upgraded for the attacker. We also see it from a penetration testing point of view. I mean, once we're trying to approach an organization and trying to penetrate its infrastructure, there is so much more available than it used to be. I mean, the endpoints for the attacker to come in are much more relevant now. If before we could have stated that the critical assets will not be available remotely, but only in office, that's something that's not relevant anymore. And that's a crazy change that we're seeing today, and it's being manipulated and utilized by attackers. Another thing that we're notifying that is being changed is the defense tools. Like, for instance, if we used to have solutions like user behavioral analysis that create some kind of baseline and tell me something nice about how Yair act and what he does, and how many times a day he does, how many keystrokes per minute he does, and that's something that was modified. I mean, that's something that was upgraded and changed, and we should keep track. That's evolution being fast forward, as I said.
Yeah, no, that's it. That's actually a fascinating point, because I guess all the anomaly detection tools that that used to be there were very much dependent on identifying using artificial intelligence and machine learning, but like human patterns that were pretty much thrown out the door this past year, because everybody's patterns have been changed, right? So everybody's connecting from random places at random hours. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people on this session and in general can relate to the fact that your kids are at home now, you're busy in the morning becoming a teacher, and then in the afternoon running play group, and then in the evening actually going to work. So the hours that we operate in have also completely changed. That's interesting, very interesting point. I wonder how those companies are handling that point. Kind of the behavior analysis companies are probably have to learn all kinds of new patterns, which I'm sure will be able to be cleared out over time, and new patterns will be established. But certainly I think in this in the midterm, that's probably a huge challenge. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just to emphasize, it's also relevant for the third party. I mean, if you used to have some kind of remote support or something else that where it's coming from, how it looks like, it's not relevant anymore. Everybody's coming from home, even the technicians that are supporting you, even the software development that develops software for you. So the world keeps evolving.
Yeah, interesting. Nadav, as the COVID affected the consultancy side of things, has that changed the way your clients act, what they depend on you for? Like, what have you seen there change, in the market?
Definitely. It definitely changed things. And from our perspective as consultants and security advisors, we say that we always like to go back to the basics. And the basics, the best practices tell us that in these situations, when we're talking about significant changes in environments, in architecture, in businesses, you have to sit down, take a step back, and reevaluate the risks, or reevaluate the incremental risks that are emerging. And internally, that's what we did, as a consultancy, as an advisory function. We sat down, between ourselves and with our customers, and reevaluated the new risks that were emerging as a result of all those shifts and pattern movements and so forth. So we did come up with, you can say, a focused offering, even a campaign around COVID-19 themed consultancy services. And it reflected the requirements that we began to see right after this, the outbreak of COVID-19. So we saw a lot of things around changing, the workspace and working from home. So even things that you don't normally think about, like the security awareness and training content. So a lot of people are now working from home, and maybe they are, their network is less safe, or they're connected to some IoT devices. And who knows, it's not the corporate footprint. So we had to incorporate this into the awareness content. And there are a lot of technologies that came into play. So for remote connection and handling the volume of remote connectivity and pattern changes, like you mentioned. And so now we're talking about secure architecture, and maybe from the organizational side and the security plan, we have to think about technologies and products and solutions that can support this shift. And there are a lot of, there were very many consequences to the COVID-19 situation. And it also accelerated trends that were already progressing, like consuming more SaaS applications, and because it doesn't matter where you are connecting from, and cloud adoption for the same reason. And all of this, for us, it's taking all those considerations into our methodology and into our practice to be able to provide, you can say, a COVID-themed support and consultancy to our customers. So yeah, definitely we felt the changes, and they're still with us, by the way, almost 1 year after.
Yeah, it's first of all, massive changes, but I think that the big thing is, and that's, I think, a big change in the world today, is that people have kind of got used to that unknown, right? They don't really know what's coming, and planning for the unknown is always the hardest. Maybe taking some practical advice. I'll go back to you, Nadav, on that already. What would be some good tips for organizations today to take in order to properly protect their vendor risk programs and supply chain? What can they practically do now to immediately make that better?
Right. Okay. So I think I can talk about, because conscious of time, of course, I can talk about this for hours. But if we talk again from the back to basics point of view, then I strongly believe in adopting a methodology for third-party security risk management before everything. Before you come up with a control framework and an inventory and so forth, just to start designing and implementing a methodology. And the methodology is inclusive of all of the steps that you have to take in terms of this life cycle, engagement and due diligence, and onboarding an entity, remediation, and so forth. All the, the best practice steps, put it, in place, put it together, write a procedure, policy, and that would be your guideline. And on that, you can, take the additional steps and think about tools and technologies that obviously you're aware, can support this whole life cycle and procedure and control frameworks and so forth. And the other thing that I would really, really recommend is when, to know how to engage with a vendor or a third-party entity or a supplier or whoever it is that you have to, to conduct this assurance exercise, and try to be less generic and more flexible, because it's not like third-party security and risk management. It's not like a one-size-fits-all program, but you have to understand your suppliers, your entities, third parties, and engage them in a way that is meaningful and also that works for them. So not all the time you just throw a questionnaire at them and hope for the best, but sometimes, you have to meet with them face to face or virtually and tailor, this program according to their culture, just so you can, get the best results. So yeah, so it's, from my perspective, it's back to basics. Implement a policy before you do everything else. And within this policy, just in terms of engaging a third party, do it in a way that is flexible, sometimes creative, but meaningful to get the desired results from this process.
Great tips. Omer, some final tips there before we move over to the Q&A.
Yeah, sure. Just Nadav, I think Nadav already covered all of the before, but I would like to suggest another tip for the after. Let's practice, people. Let's do some kind of practice about attacks and coming from different angles. Like what will happen if this third party will launch an attack against you? Does he have the credentials? Do you have the ability to contain it? Do you have the ability to respond to it? That's something that if you will, if you'll stand with these questions, if you try to resolve these questions during the fight, during the real time, you will most probably get not the best result. So if you practice, if you know how to handle, if it will get into your instincts, that's something that for sure will make your response much better.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think that, in the daily work that we do, we see a lot of times, we're heavily focused on, the NIST CSF, and, you think about the framework there, and, it talks about identify, protect, detect, respond, recover. I think one of the interesting points there, if you think about the 5 functions there, is that the last 2 are respond, recover, really. So, 2/3 of that framework are looking at after you've been attacked, what do you do, right? And thinking about that ahead of time, I think is a great point, because part of cyber defense really, includes that the what they call the tabletop exercise, the war games, and just thinking about what happens if this vendor does get attacked, how much damage can they cause us. So great point. So let's look at a few of the questions here. I see one of them we've already answered, which was the tips. So I'll skip that one. Maybe a good framework for vendor risk. Maybe Nadav, I'll take that over to you. What is a good framework for vendor risk? Do you have any suggestions around that?
I think a good framework is your framework. So again, there isn't any like industry accepted best practice like we know from other types of control frameworks like PCI or CIS. It does have to be based on solid foundations and solid security best practices. So you might want to base your third-party assurance framework on things like ISO 27001 or CIS, or maybe even PCI, or things that and control frameworks that have good coverage in terms of security domains and practices. But it also has to fit your business. It has to be aligned with your business. And so it is a really, and that's actually one of the areas that we provide consulting just to help organizations develop and design their third-party assurance control framework. So it has to be tied with your business objectives and with your business and with your overarching risk management framework. So yeah, to base it on solid, good security best practices, but also implement your own themes as an organization and as a business. And one of them should be, or could be, tiers. For example, not all third parties or third-party entities are the same. Some have more impact on your security, some have obviously less impact. So you might want to build a few tiers in terms of the overall exposure and impact that you have with those third parties. And just launch something that is more custom and tailor-made to your own requirements. So there is no best practices you can just get off the shelf, but yes, you can rely on industry-accepted best practices, but create your own custom internal framework against your third parties.
Yeah, that's a great answer. That leads actually, there's another question here about quantification of risk. So how do you quantify vendor risk in the most effective way? Maybe I'll take that one since that's pretty much what we spend most of our day on. I think that quantification of risk from our perspective is really trying to create that tiering structure that Nadav just mentioned with a risk score there. But that's compiled of what is the impact of an attack from that vendor on your organization, together with that probability of that attack happening, right? So quantifying the probability part, I think, is something that you can do using the controls that the vendor has in place. So, questionnaires, certifications, evidence that you ask from the vendor, but that unfortunately is not sufficient enough, right? So I think combining that with automated scanning of like darknet, perimeter, public web, things like that together will give you the most, the closest thing to hermetically sealing that probability piece. And if you have a good impact and probability scoring mechanism in place, then you can really quantify risk of, identifying who are your most risky vendors and tiered out, just like Nadav said there. So I think that's a great point, a great question that led off, off your point. Maybe I'll take one or two more questions here. Here's an interesting one. A complex cyber attack could take down a company. How does an incident response company deal with the other non-technical aspects of the incident? For example, like the legal side, PR, things like that. So maybe Omer, over to you. That's right up your alley. Thoughts on that one?
Yeah, sure. So when we're launching an incident response, we have different disciplines, different specialists that we tag along. Like for instance, the law specialist. We have others, other campaigns that were involved in PR, in public relations, and in other cases we needed to bring up negotiation specialists, because you need to negotiate with the attacker. So there are different specialists that are involved. We have this nice case in the States, which the customer got us as a response team, but he didn't like the report because the report wasn't that complimenting to him. So what he did is he fired us as an IR team and got us back to as a bypass via his lawyer. So now he has the protection of the lawyer client thing. So that's something that always should be involved. That's something that we should bear in mind when we're coming into a crisis or crisis management.
Yeah, I think that the compliance element of things is it's another piece. That's another piece you have to think about ahead of time. But I think if you focus on compliance and make sure that you're meeting regulatory requirements, that's another area that the better you do that beforehand, the less likely you'll run into legal challenges during. But it sounds like there's it's definitely a piece of your business today when you're doing the incident response part. Let's take maybe one more question here. So we see here that COVID-19 has resulted in the disruption of the workforce and suppliers. From your experience, what are you seeing in the market? What are some of the considerations to ensure the support and continuity of critical security functions, including vendor engagement and procurement of IT infrastructure? I assume that also has to do with MSSPs, or they themselves being affected by COVID-19. So any thoughts about making sure that those suppliers are properly protecting themselves in regards to this changing environment, the COVID-19 thing? Nadav, you want to go with that, or Omer? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I hope that I understand the question. Yeah, one thing that we can talk about is that BCP is also enjoying the few minutes of glory now because of COVID. And now everyone is starting to acknowledge BCP and business continuity programs and consulting, because all those scenarios that we have just been writing and working on them on paper, suddenly we are now experiencing one. So business continuity has become also a very significant trend now, if we talk about focus after post-COVID-19. So yes, I would say that within your third-party security or risk management program, we know that there are now more significant BCP considerations because we now just experienced it live, that everything can happen. And to be honest, there was quite a lot of panic when things just started around March this year in terms of business continuity, and a lot of also issues that organizations weren't prepared to face. So now, within your program and the third-party risk management program, just incorporate and put more emphasis on BCP to review it and make sure that if there are also things like shared responsibilities, and if you have an internal organizational BCP and some part of it is under the responsibility of some supplier or outsourced provider, it could be managed, MSS provider, managed security services providers like managed SOC and SIEM and so forth. Just make sure that you validate their compliance or their readiness to those scenarios, and do it in a much more effective, or make sure to do it in an effective way. To go back to Omer's point, I think one of the good ways to handle this is to do training, and even simple training sessions like tabletops, that includes all the stakeholders, including outsourced providers, and make sure that you train them together with yourself when you are conducting training sessions. So yeah, it should be a fundamental part of the third-party risk management program, and training just include your suppliers, or at least the critical suppliers.
Yeah, no, that's a good point about the BCP part. I think that in the past it was just like a single question, just check the box that you have it. And today, the quality of that BCP has become a lot more critical. So great answer there. With that, we're concluding our. Yeah, go, Omer. You want to?
Yeah, just to add to that, BCP to the concept of the BCP. We just had a recent case of someone getting crypto locked, and that was quite funny because he started in excuses saying he doesn't have any case because he has a backup. When it turns up, the backup is not good. So backing up is not good enough. Please try to restore it once in a while and see if it's operational.
Yeah, that's a good point. All right. Well, first of all, thank you guys really so much for participating today. That was a great session, really helpful. And I think that we got some really great practical tips out of here. We're going to be conducting our next webinar, in the third week of February. And it will actually be a continuation to this one, focused on the SolarWinds attack, and in a deep dive there. Our research lab actually has conducted a tremendous amount of research around that attack and how that connects to the risk management world, including taking some of the tools that were used there by the attackers and the kind of reverse engineering to understand what was used there and how the methods really took place there. So super fascinating webinar coming up, and we'll send out notices on that to follow. At this point, I'd like to thank you all for joining today, and really appreciate your time. Have a great week. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, Yair. Thanks everyone for joining.
Take care.
Take care.
Thanks. Bye-bye.